Good afternoon and welcome everyone. I'm Marcella Starr and I'm the president of the Wyoming Monument Association. Thank you. Boy, I never thought I'd be doing this in my lifetime. At this time, I would ask that you all stand for the singing of the national anthem by Wyoming resident and Nashville recording artist Jeannie Zano.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Thank you very much, Jeannie. We're on a very strict time schedule, and I have been known to babble. So I have my trusty pink pig timer, which I am setting to 2 minutes. If someone ever said to me, and this, let me tell you, this speech works better on a sunny day, but it was too late today. If someone ever said to me, Marcella, what do you think the chances are that you would ever be sitting on the stage with the former president and his first lady? And my instant response would be, if you looked up into the sky and saw a herd of pigs flying over, that's about the chances that it would be. Well, for you or those who are not under cover of tent, and if you should hear oinking noises, I suggest you try to go for cover, because I am indeed on the stage with former President Jimmy Carter and his lovely First Lady Rosalynn. I must tell you, it is truly a once-in-a-lifetime experience. I thank you all for coming. What a tribute. I am so proud that the Carters can see the beautiful National Historic Monument, which has been repaired and restored for another generation after being struck by lightning in 2008. At this time, I take great pleasure in introducing Mr. Larry, actually Dr. Larry Cook, who along with his lovely wife Diane were the catalyst for this event. They have put so much time and effort into this occasion to make it special. I take pride in introducing my new friend, Mr. Larry Cook. And my timer didn't even go off.
Thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. And thank you so much for being here on this beautiful day. And you know what? Despite the rain, it is a beautiful day. I'm not going to let the rain deter that sentence in my talk. First of all, I want to thank Marcella for such a great introduction and all the help that her and Mayor Bob Boyer gave us to plan this event. I also want to thank all the agencies that were involved, all the law enforcement agencies, the Wyoming DPW, local businesses, the EMS, Mart's buses, and I know there's others, and everyone that contributed to this event. Today is a great day for the Wyoming Valley and the Wyoming Monument, and today you are here to witness history. When Diane and I visited Plains, Georgia for the very first time several years ago, we didn't know anything about the Plains, Georgia Better Hometown program. However, on your first visit there, it takes only a few minutes to look around to see all the work that goes in and the care and the pride that goes into that town to make it a great place to visit as well as live. The Plains, Georgia Better Hometown program, under the coordination of Ruth Sanders, is here with us today, and I'd like to give her a big hand. She's the coordinator of the Better Hometown program in Plains, Georgia, and they do a remarkable job. The program works closely with the National Park Service and the residents of Plains, Georgia, in order to historically preserve that town. The experience of visiting Plains, Georgia is truly awesome. There's no other word for it. If you haven't been there, I would strongly urge you to put it on your list. If you've been there, I'll guarantee you it's still on your list to go back. It's a small town with a population of less than 700 people, and it sets a tremendous example for communities large and small across our nation. When Diane and I visited the Carters and Plains a few months ago, we were inviting them to come here and visit us once again. And the historian in me thought it would be a good idea to ask President Carter to come and speak at this great site. And so my pitch to him went something like this. I said, President Carter, you know, Rutherford Hayes visited the monument in the late 19th century, and Teddy Roosevelt, he visited the monument in the early 20th century, and it sure would be neat to have you be here in the 21st century. And President Carter's... Thank you. And President Carter's response to that was, he put his hand on my arm, he gave me that famous smile, and he said, let me see what I can do. And I knew at that point he'd be here. So, ladies and gentlemen, our honored guests today, President and Mrs. Carter, are true champions of human rights. They are promoters of peace. They are promoters of peace and freedom throughout the world, and they are alleviators of suffering worldwide. It is my extreme honor and privilege to present to you the third president to speak here at the Wyoming Monument, the 39th President of the United States, and the former First Lady of the United States, Diane and my dear friends, Jimmy and Rosalynn Carter.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much. Y'all will have a seat and relax. One of the best things that could have happened to me today is to have rain. I'm a farmer, and we've been visiting a farmer in Pennsylvania now since 1978. 36 years, and we've been here every year except one. And so he plants about 5,000 acres of crops just south of State College, 3,500 acres of corn, and the rest of it is in soybeans and grain. So he was praying for rain, and I was praying with him because he lets us come and fish in his stream every year. So rain's the second best thing that could happen to me. The first thing is coming to meet with you, and to thank Larry and Diane Cook for forming really a partnership between Plains, Pennsylvania and Plains, Georgia. Although we only have less than 700 people in Plains, we have 11 churches. So you can figure out how we spend a lot of time. By the way, every Sunday I teach a Bible lesson. So if any of you are interested in learning more about the Bible, come down and visit our church on Sunday. We'll be glad to have you. Well, I'm very interested in history, obviously, and I have known about this historic monument ever since the first 5 minutes that I knew Larry, because he's been talking about it ever since. And when I drove up, I recognized it because I spent 2 days painting it a few weeks ago, and we're going to be auctioning off my painting of the Wyoming Monument. And so I never dreamed, Marcella's been talking about never dreaming about anything. When I campaigned in Pennsylvania for president, I never dreamed that I'd be coming back here to make a historic speech where 2 other presidents had spoken. I won't even analyze what party they belong to. That doesn't matter. As a matter of fact, I've been interested in the Revolutionary War era. I wrote a book called The Hornet's Nest, and I've also written 26 other books, and my wife always likes for me to announce that my books are still on sale. So, well, I really enjoyed being president and learning about the country. By the way, when I ran in Pennsylvania in the Democratic primary, I had a lot of opposition, and I carried every county in Pennsylvania except one. And that was Butts County. I didn't carry Butts County. I don't know why. I hadn't been back there since. But it's a real honor and pleasure for me to come here and to see this tremendous crowd on a rainy day. And I know you have a lot of other things to do, and I'm very grateful to you. It was obviously a unique honor for me and Rosalynn to be the first family of this great country. When I was in the White House, I came there as a former submarine officer who studied nuclear physics, and I helped to build a second atomic submarine before I resigned from the Navy and came home to Plains, where my wife and I have lived since 1833. Our families have. I'm not quite that old. I should almost, but not quite. And I was a farmer for 17 years before I ran for the state senate, and then later for governor, and then for president. And so I had a combination of knowledge about technology and science and the military, and I also had a great desire to keep our country at peace. So I was able to help develop the first airplanes that could fly where they were invisible to radar. They called it stealth bombers and planes. I also was able to develop the most accurate pinpoint bombing, and also cruise missiles that could be fired from land, from sea, and from the air. So I was very instrumental, along with the great Secretary of Defense, in developing a country that was strong and able. But I was determined, as I was when I was on a submarine, to use this national strength to preserve the peace, not to go to war. And that was a very important element of my life. So I was able to work with President Brezhnev in the Soviet Union then, now Russia, to control nuclear weapons. I was able to bring peace between Israel and Egypt for the first time, and that treaty that was signed 33 years ago has never been violated. And the other thing that I was able to do was to have normal diplomatic relations with the People's Republic of China. We had been at odds with them for 36 years before I was finally able to do that in early 1979. One of the first things that Rosa and I did after we left the White House was to go to China. And we visited all over China as guests of Deng Xiaoping, who was the head of China then. And then we came back through Japan. And that's what makes me think about how good it is to have been a president. Because we went to a little village in the southern part of Japan. They had a small college there. Only about 600 people were graduating, and I made a graduation speech. And everybody was really nervous. The professors were nervous, the students were nervous, their families were nervous. I was a little bit nervous as well, and so I decided to tell a joke. And as you know, it takes a lot longer to tell anything in Japanese than it does in English. So I told my joke, and then the interpreter repeated my joke, and everybody in the audience just died laughing. It was the best response I ever had to a joke in my life. I couldn't wait to get my speech over and went and asked the interpreter, "How did you tell my joke?" And he was very evasive. And I kept on. I said, "Look, you got to tell me how you told that joke." And he bowed his head. He looked the other way, and I insisted. He finally said, "Well, I told the audience, President Carter told a funny story. Everyone must laugh." So you see, there's some great advantages in having been President of the United States. Well, when Rosa and I came home, we wanted to continue our life. We were both fairly young then as a former president. I was just 56 years old, and I knew I thought I had 25 years of life expectancy ahead of me, and I've already exceeded that, by the way, and we're still going strong. But anyway, we decided, we asked ourselves, what can we do with the rest of our lives? And we wanted to help the little town of Plains, Georgia, where both she and I were born. As a matter of fact, when Rosa was born, I was 3 years old, and my family lived next door to hers. So my mother used to tell me when I was 3 years old, I peeped through the cradle and saw my future wife lying there with no clothes on. And then later, when I was a senior at Naval Academy, called it first class, I asked Rosalynn to marry me on Lincoln's birthday. She came to Annapolis, and she said no. And so after she dated all the other boys in Sumter County for the next 3 or 4 months, she finally agreed to marry me, and we got married July the 7th, 67 years ago. So we've been married 67 years now. We have 4 children, we have 12 grandchildren, we have 9 great-grandchildren, and we're still growing, as far as the family goes. Well, that's just the background to let you know how proud I am to be with you, because I feel so much at home when I come to Pennsylvania and meet people that are friendly and hospitable and also interested in helping to a great degree, some of you, with the little town of Plains, Georgia. So thank you very much. What I've been asked to talk about this afternoon, and I'll be fairly brief, is about the Carter Center, where Rosa and I do spend our lives. Both of us have now been professors at Emory University for 31 years. We still teach at Emory every month, but also we have the Carter Center, and it's devoted to filling vacuums in the world. If the United Nations or the United States government or Harvard University is doing something that is needed, we don't interfere with them, we don't compete with them, we don't duplicate what they're doing. We just try to go and take on tasks that no one else wants to do. Quite often, for instance, we get involved with countries that are not very friendly with the United States, or with groups of people that are not very friendly with the United States. This past week, for instance, I had the president of Bolivia come to Plains. I grow peanuts, he grows cocoa. And it's legal in Bolivia, by the way, to have a cocoa plant. And I promised him next time I go down there, I'm going to visit his cocoa plantation because he's visited my peanut plantation. But we try to deal with countries that are not any longer friendly with the United States. We go to Venezuela, we go to Bolivia, we go to Peru, we go to Ecuador, we go to Nicaragua, and so forth. We also go to Nepal. We just got back from Nepal, where Mount Everest is. They have a Maoist government with whom the United States is not very friendly. We go and meet with them, and we'll be helping with their election later on this year. I'll be going back to Nepal again this year. We just went from Nepal to Myanmar, which used to be Burma, and we deal in some areas with countries or with people that are not very friendly with the United States government, like the Hamas. We try to still preserve the peace in the Middle East between Israel and Egypt, but also we're trying to promote peace for Israel itself with other neighbors. including the Palestinians. And half of the Palestinians about are Hamas and half of them Fatah. So we work with both of them, trying to get them together so they can negotiate with Israel and bring peace. So those are the kind of things that we do at the Carter Center. But as we developed for a few years, we found out that the greatest need in the world for alleviating suffering is to deal with diseases that no longer are present in our country, not even known in our country anymore, but that afflict hundreds of millions of people, particularly in Africa. And if there are doctors in the audience or medical students, you wouldn't even recognize some of these names. We deal with onchocerciasis, which is river blindness. We deal with dracunculiasis, which is guinea worm. We deal with schistosomiasis and lymphatic filariasis. Lymphatic filariasis is the same as elephantiasis. It's when your arms and legs or your sexual organs swell up to grotesque sizes. And we also deal with trachoma. Trachoma is a disease of the eyes. It's the #1 cause of blindness in the world, except for cataracts. So those are the kind of diseases with which we deal in Africa. And we work very closely with some of the pharmaceutical companies that we think charge too much for medicine, and I think that's true, but they also give free medicine to the Carter Center so we can treat people in those poor countries around the world that have these diseases. We've put, for instance, Merck Company gives us a medicine to treat river blindness. It's called Mectizan. If any of you have a puppy dog and you give that dog a heart guard every month, it's exactly the same medicine that we use to prevent river blindness. And Merck gives us free medicine. And every year we treat about 12.5 million people that have river blindness, and if we give them one tablet a year, they won't go blind. So we've treated about 150. I think it'd be better if you maybe stand up to the side or sit down, because people behind you can't see. I'm not trying to tell you what to do, but I'm just trying to protect the people in the back. Thanks a lot. So we treat people like that, and we also deal with trachoma. Trachoma is a disease that first creates kind of infected eyes. If you go into a Dinka village or a Maasai village and you see the little children at a distance, you think they're all wearing eyeglasses. And when you get up close to them, it's a ring of flies, like house flies, that stay permanently around their eyes, getting moisture out of their eyeballs. And eventually the eyelids get infected, and the upper eyelid turns inward, so every time they blink the eye, their eyelashes slash the cornea and causes blindness. We treat those people as well. And one of the things we do is to try to get rid of the flies, so we teach them how to build latrines, or just outdoor toilets. And it only costs them about $1 if they do it themselves. So in Ethiopia, we thought we would teach the people how to dig these latrines, and we thought we might have 10,000 at the end of the first year. And at the end of the year, we had 86,000, and now we've got about 1.5 million latrines built. So I'm known for the #1 latrine builder in the world now. And I might tell you why that became so popular. For instance, in Africa and in Ethiopia and a lot of other African countries, it's completely taboo or forbidden for a woman to relieve herself in the daytime. It's a complete disgrace if a woman is seen urinating or defecating. So they had to do it inside the houses or just in a secluded place. And so when the women learned that you could build a latrine and put some bushes around the outside so people couldn't see you, they are the ones that told their husband, "You got to build me a latrine." So you see, it's kind of a women's liberation movement to have, but it also has cut down dramatically on the incidence of that disease. The worst disease with which we've dealt is called guinea worm. Guinea worm is a disease caused by people who don't have any deep wells and don't have any running water. And they have ponds that fill up during the rainy season, and then the other 9 months of the year, they don't get any water, and they have to drink water out of that pond. It becomes stagnant. And in that stagnant water, the guinea worm eggs develop. And if you take one drink of that water with guinea worm eggs in it, then in 12 months, you've got a worm this long inside your body. It's called a guinea worm, and the guinea worm steals the inside of your skin and comes out and makes a horrendous sore that destroys muscle tissue, kind of like polio. So we have started out, because no one else wanted to deal with this disease, we started out dealing with guinea worm, and we found the guinea worm in 23,600 villages in 20 different countries. And we in 23,600 villages, and we had 3.5 million cases of guinea worm. We have worked on every one of those villages by training the people what to do. And this year, so far, we only have 48 cases in the whole world. and in a couple more years, there will be 0 cases of guinea worm on Earth. And that's the kind of work that Rosalynn and I do. We work with a lot of other people, and we also, while we're in those countries, we've also had a very good agriculture program. Since I'm a farmer, we went into 15 countries in Africa and taught them how to grow more food grain. We don't deal with cash crops like tobacco or cotton. We just deal with things that you eat. Corn, which they call maize, wheat, rice, barley, sorghum, millet, those kind of things. So we have taught those people how to double or triple their production of those crops just by planting in rows and controlling the weeds and that sort of thing and using the right kind of seed. So that's the kind of work we do. But while we're in those countries, dealing with guinea worm or dealing with onchocerciasis or dealing with trachoma or making sure they can grow more grain, we get to know the people, we get to know their leaders. So then when they have a difficult election coming along, they call on the Carter Center to help them have an honest and fair and safe election. So quite often, if a country has never had democracy and they want to have the first election, they call on me and Rosalynn to bring the Carter Center people into those villages, into those countries to have an honest election. This past month, we had our 94th troubled election in Kenya. And we have about 4 or 5 of those elections every year. And it's a very wonderful contribution both to, I'd say, freedom and democracy on Earth. We also have a peace agreement that we pursue. I've already mentioned some of the countries in which we're involved. If 2 countries have a war with each other, we make ourselves available, and I go with Rosalynn to those countries, and we try to negotiate between the leaders of both those countries and end the war and bring peace. And if they have a civil war, and that's where most of the countries are afflicted, they have people fighting against each other within their own country, we try to bring peace as well. So that's the kind of thing that the Carter Center does. We've learned a lot about America in dealing with people around the world. Rosa and I have visited about more than 140 countries on Earth. And we have seen how different people are. We've gotten to respect them. We go into the poorest villages on Earth, and we see how if we give them a little bit of information about what causes guinea worm and how to do away with it, or what causes trachoma and what to do away with it, they take charge of their own lives. And quite often it's the first time in their life they've ever experienced success. And it's the first time in their lives they've ever had foreigners come in and promise them something and carry out the promise. And I have learned, no matter how poor those people are or how backward the people might be, we've found that they're just as smart as I am. And they're just as ambitious as I am. And they're just as hardworking as I am. And their family values are just as good as mine. So we've learned to respect other people who are quite different from us. And I think that's one of the great attributes of America because, as I've said often, America is not a mixing place. It's brought people together from different countries on Earth, and I bet there are 15 or 20 or more countries represented here. And we're kind of like a beautiful mosaic where everyone still keeps some semblance of where we came from, but we learn how to bind together to make a beautiful picture of democracy and freedom. My prayer in the future is that America will continue My prayer in the future is that America will continue to improve itself, continue to grow in strength and ability and influence around the world, but will have moral values of which we can be proud. I went to school in Plains, Georgia, and so did my wife, and so did my 3 sons, and so did our parents. And I had a favorite teacher named Miss Julia Coleman. And I've quoted Miss Julia Coleman when I was inaugurated president, and a few years later I quoted Miss Julia Coleman again when I got the Nobel Peace Prize. I'm the only president that ever quoted a school teacher so far. But Miss Julia used to tell us, I was just a country boy. My daddy was a small farmer. And Miss Julia used to tell us, we need to remember one thing in life. We need to accommodate changing times. But we need to cling to principles that never change. And I think that's what our country is doing. We're accommodating changing times, but we need to never forget those moral and ethical values or principles that we learn as human beings. And I think that our country eventually ought to be just as good as the finest human being we know. And most of us have values that we get from our religion, no matter what our religion might be. I happen to be a Baptist. I'm a Christian. I know there are a lot of other people in this audience who are maybe Muslims or maybe Jews or whatever. That's fine. But we have basically the same principles no matter what religion we choose or what religion our parents introduced us to and we still have. I worship the Prince of Peace. And I believe that our country ought to be known as the #1 proponent or endorser of peace, not the #1 war country on earth. Our country ought to be known as a champion of justice, and justice means equality of opportunity. Since I left office, we've had a dramatic change in the other direction. Now, the richest people in America have twice as much of the wealth compared to the poor people as they did just a few years ago. And we have tax laws passed and so forth that continue to benefit the richest people, and the poorer people, the working class people, are not adequately cared for and given equal opportunity to improve themselves by our government. We also need to promote human rights and freedom around the world. And we need to have basic respect for other people as well. Those are the kind of principles that you would want to see a worthy or admirable human being have. So I think America ought to be just as good as its people. That's my prayer in the future. In closing, let me thank you again. I'm really grateful, for instance, that this monument has been preserved, and that I have been given the honor to come here and stand in roughly the same place as 2 former presidents of our country. Recently, we went out to the George W. Bush Library to dedicate it. There were 5 presidents there at one time, and we didn't even think about who was a Democrat and who was a Republican. We just like members of a fraternity or just like members of the same family. That's what I hope we'll see in our entire country in the future. Not blue and red states, not Democrats versus Republicans, but all of us look upon our great country as America, where we all have the same values, the same moral values, and we accommodate changing times, but we still preserve those wonderful principles that continue to make our country the greatest nation on earth. So God bless you, and God bless our country. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, I asked for a historic speech here today, and we got one. I'd like to introduce now the Wyoming Borough's mayor, Bob Boyer. The Wyoming Borough is very fortunate to have Bob as their mayor.
Yay.
He's been mayor here for the past 8 years, and he just won another term. And we're very happy about that. Along with being mayor, he's a professor of criminal justice at LCC. Ladies and gentlemen, the mayor of Wyoming, Bob Boyer.
You know that phrase, you're a tough act to follow? President Carter, you give a whole new meaning to that today. Good afternoon, everybody. President Mrs. Carter, on behalf of Wyoming Borough Council and the local, state, and national officials that are with us today, I'd like to welcome you to Wyoming. It's truly an honor and a privilege to have you visit us today at the historic Wyoming Monument. And it's really exciting for all of us to take part in this very historic day as a third U.S. president speaks at this site. I'd like to just welcome and acknowledge Congressman Matt Cartwright, some of my colleagues and friends, our elected officials, senators, Congressman Cartwright is also joined by representatives from Senator Udechak's and Senator Baker's office. We have state representatives with us today, Representative Phyllis Mundy, Representative Eddie Day Pashinsky, State Representative Karen Boback, and State Representatives Jerry Mullery and Mike Carroll were not able to join us, but they asked me to send their regards. I'd also like to recognize and acknowledge my colleagues on the Wyoming Borough Council. Council members Michael Flynn, Councilman Frank Urich, Stephen Nelawaiko, Diane Smiles, Mike Beloga, Councilman Bill Starr, and Wyoming Borough Manager Tamara Smith. I also have to acknowledge March Trailways for providing transportation for the event. And for those of you, when you're leaving later on, the buses will be in front. They'll take you right back to your vehicles at the Midway or Flack Field, and we'll get everybody home safely. I also have to acknowledge the men and women of the Wyoming Police Department, Wyoming Fire Department, our rescue and our paramedics on site. We have communities from all around helping us today. Exeter Borough is here, and 44th, West Wyoming, and West Pittston. Thank you for your help. And also joining us today is our local district judge, Joseph Carmody. He's over to the right here. You know, now I feel like a game show host because I have a bunch of gifts for President Carter. So, President Carter, in recognition of your presidency and your work with the Carter Center, your work for Habitat for Humanity, and being awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 2002. Today, as mayor, I have proclaimed today President Jimmy Carter Day. And also the Borough Council and I would like you to present you with a key to Wyoming Borough. Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you. We're also presenting with the president with a gift from a local artist, Kathy Redmond. She has actually done a sculpture of the president. It was inspired by his book, The Hornet's Nest, and we're very grateful to present that on behalf of Ms. Redmond today. Now, I'd just like to ask, I didn't see her, but is Florence Jumper here? Did she make it with us today? Florence jumper? How about this, ladies and gentlemen? 100 years old on Thursday. Florence, I see you back there, but I wanted to take this opportunity. 500 people wanted to say happy birthday, if you don't mind. Happy birthday, Florence. 100 years old. Florence, what's the secret to that? That says a lot. I agree. Florence, it's a pleasure to have you with us today, and happy birthday to you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank everybody for coming today. Would you join me in thanking President and Mrs. Carter for being our guests in Wyoming today? Thank you very much. And now, as we conclude our program, I'd like to invite to the stage one of our local stars, 11-year-old Abby Barheit. She's going to lead us in God Bless America. Abby?
Okay. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountains to the prairies, to the ocean.